my name is Sandra, and I'm going to take you through the terminology for geomorphology, and we're starting with weathering and erosion. So weathering is breaking down of rocks. We get three different types: chemical weathering, physical weathering, and biological weathering. So we start with chemical weathering. Chemical weathering is when rocks break down because of chemical reactions. So the first one here is hydrolysis. So I highlighted this hydro. So hydro has got to do with water. But in this instance specifically, hydrolysis is the hydrogen and the oxygen in the water that makes a chemical reaction with the minerals in the rock. And that causes the rock to get softer and to get weak. And therefore it breaks, which is chemical weathering. Here's an example. So if we've got feldspars, that's the type of hard rock, can become clay if it goes through the hydrolysis process. Then hydration is that the minerals in the rock bonds with the water and it makes it expand. So as the rock expands, it creates stress, which causes it to disintegrate or to crack. So weaken, crack, disintegrate. That's our words for weathering. Okay, and then a solution is the minerals in the rock dissolve in water. So if we're thinking, what kind of stuff can you get in a rock that can dissolve in water? So it's usually salts. So both limestone and rock salt. It's two types of rocks that has salt in it, which then dissolves in the water, causing the rock to weaken and crack, disintegrate. Okay, this can cause sinkholes. So sinkholes is basically we've got soil at the top and we've got a rock at the bottom that is cracking, breaking up, weathering. And as this collapses, there's space open. So the soil on top of it is not supported anymore. And then that falls in. So the ground collapses and we call that a sinkhole. Okay, then the next one is carbonation. So carbonation is carbon dioxide that dissolves in the rainwater and it makes an acid called carbonic acid. So the carbonic acid reacts to the minerals and it causes it to weaken and break. And then oxidation is also called rust. So rust happens with iron. So iron in the rock reacts with oxygen in the air. We can see it because the rock changes color from light gray to brown red. You know what rust looks like. It's brownish red. And that causes the rock to break up. So that was chemical weathering. So hydrolysis, hydrogen and oxygen. Hydration, water that expands inside the rock. Solution, salts and minerals dissolve in the water. Carbonation, carbon dioxide and rainwater forms an acid that breaks the rock down. And oxidation, rust, so it's iron and oxygen that reacts and makes the rock weaker. Right, then the next one is physical weathering. So physical weathering happens through temperature changes, wind and water, which causes the rock to break down. So the first one I've got here is thermal expansion. So thermal, got to do with temperature, expansion, expand, and then the other word here, exfoliation, is basically the outside peeling off. So here we have the weathering process when rocks expand in the day, contract at night, and that action of expanding, contracting makes the rock weak, and then the outside layers starts peeling away, and that's called exfoliation. So thermal expansion causes exfoliation. Okay, now freezing and thawing. So this one, there's 3 different names. Different people uses different names, but it's the same thing. So freezing and thawing, or frost shattering, or frost wedging, is basically when you've got small cracks in the rock, water comes in there, it freezes, and as water freezes, it expands, which makes the cracks bigger, and then eventually the rock breaks down. So we've got water freezing between the cracks and the holes in the rock. Frozen water expands and forces the cracks in the rock to widen, eventually breaking the rock apart. Now, salt wedging is exactly the same thing, but here with frost wedging or frost shattering, we had expansion because of freezing. Here we've got expansion because of salt crystals. So when there's salt that's dissolved in the rainwater, and this salt, or not necessarily just rainwater, if there's like next to an ocean or that kind of thing, we get that as well. So the water evaporates and then the salt gets left behind. That's what we're calling, what it means when we say the salt crystallizes out of the solution of water. And then the salt crystals grows, and as it grows, it makes the cracks bigger, which causes the rocks to get weaker and to crack. This usually happens, so salt wedging is the most common in dry climates such as deserts. And then we have abrasion. So abrasion is things hitting against each other. So this one is the breaking down and wearing away of rocks by mechanical action of other rocks. So basically different rocks bang against each other. But this doesn't have to be rocks, it can also be sand, let's just say, or sand. Because sand is basically just rocks broken down. So the 3 agents of physical weathering that causes abrasion is water, wind, and gravity. So sand or other rocks carried in water or on the wind, or just gravity, like it falling on top of each other, causes rocks to break. So that is physical weathering, temperature, wind, and water. So it's got to do with freezing and thawing of water. All right, now we've got biological weathering. So biological weathering is the breaking down of rocks because of living organisms. So the first one we've got here is organic activity of algae and lichen. So lichen and algae are organisms that can grow on rock. And it grows on rock, and where it gets its food from is from the rock, because it's not on the soil. So it doesn't have roots into the soil to get minerals. It gets its minerals directly from the rock, which means that it's taking something away from the rock. So the rock gets weaker and breaks. So organisms such as lichen and algae often live on bare rock and extract minerals from the rock. This biochemical weathering process leaches minerals from the rock, causing it to weaken and break down. Okay, then organic decay. So when organic things, so living things, die and decays, it produces acidic compounds, so acids are produced. And acids can dissolve the rock, which means that it gets weak and it breaks. Okay, then rocks can disintegrate by plant growth. So the most common form of biological weathering is when plant roots grow into cracks and crevices of the rock and causes the rock to split or break. So the roots grow, and as the plant grows, the root gets bigger and bigger and bigger and makes the cracks wider, and then the rock splits. This is a very slow process because you have to wait for the root to grow big enough to split the rock. Okay, then we also have burrowing and tunneling organisms. So some animals burrow or tunnel into rocks or cracks in the rocks and causes the rock to break or disintegrate. So this can also, okay, so let's just give examples: ants, earthworms, rabbits, woodchucks, and other types of animals. So these ones also, so they dig hole in the soil. And then when you've got holes in the soil, water and air can come into it. And then that can cause the mechanical or chemical weathering. I said mechanical, physical, same thing. So it's either that some animals burrow into the rock or little cracks in the rock, or that we get animals that digs holes in the soil, which causes water and air to reach the rock, causing other types of weathering. Okay, so that was weathering. The last two things with weathering is I want to tell you how human activities can influence weathering. So the two big ones we've got is nitrogen fertilizers. So we've got a lot of fertilizers that has nitrogen in it because plants need nitrogen to grow. And then that gets into the groundwater. And nitrogen and water also makes an acid, which chemically weathers the rock. So this chemical weathering is completely natural, but if we're adding more nitrogen and more nitrogen as fertilizer for on farms, then it can make the weathering worse. Okay, and then acid rain. So acid rain is basically carbonation. So we've got CO2, carbon dioxide, that makes the rainwater acidic and causes weathering. So we said that with a chemical weathering. But so humans make that worse with pollution, because pollution increases acid rain. So an acid rain increases weathering. Then let's have a look at erosion. So we said weathering is rocks breaking. Erosion is the pieces that gets taken away. So weathered materials like sand is transported by wind or water. So two ways that human activity can make that worse is monoculture farming. Well, one way that they've got here. Monoculture farming is farming only one crop. So mono is one. And that depletes the soil of nutrients. So we've got less nutrients in the soil. So let's say we're planting mealies. Then we plant mealies. It takes all the nutrients out of the soil to grow these mealies. And then we harvest the mealies and the land lies empty. But now there's no other plants that has roots to anchor the soil, and then it gets eroded away by wind or by water. So that's monoculture farming. To counteract that, we use crop rotation. So crop rotation is basically if we rotate on which field we are planting. So we split our farm into pieces. We plant here, then there, then there, then there. So the soil recovers, which has more plant growth, more organisms and things that keeps the soil anchored. So we've got less erosion. And then deposition is basically the opposite of erosion, where the load of eroded material gets put down. So weathering, break. So rocks break. Erosion, the pieces gets taken away. Deposition, the pieces gets put down, which builds up something new. Right, so that's that section. I'm going to end the video there, and then in the next video we'll look at the vocab that's got to do with rivers. I hope it helped, and let me know if you've got questions.